Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Movie Chatter. This is the first Movie Chatter of 2021. And this is going to be an interesting episode. We kind of broke our rules about not covering movies that at least one of us hasn't seen because we thought, hey, it's Wonder Woman 84. It's a no-brainer, right? So, I fully anticipate that in this episode, we are going to have an area in which we all fully agree with one another, but then we fully disagree about the ways in which we agree. And it's still going to be a conflict-ridden episode, even though technically we all agree with one another. So stand by because the train wreck is about to ensue. But first, I am Eric. I am joined tonight by Lou and Robin. Robin, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. Yeah. It's nice to see you guys.
Yes,
again.
It has been too long. Lou, I haven't seen you in ages, but
yeah, it's been
almost
like a
full 24 hours. Yeah. Robin, though, yeah, we haven't gotten to see you since before the holidays. So welcome to 2021.
Yes, 2021.
Things are already better. We don't have to wear masks. We don't have to social distance anymore. We can go out to theaters again. We can.
Too soon.
Too soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I was going to say the problem with 2021 is it's still 2021. You know, it's 2020.
Well, next year is 2022. Like 2020 also.
We may have a whole decade of this 2020 thing.
Didn't Mad Max occur in 2021? I saw that earlier today.
I saw something about that. Yeah. Was it 2021 or something like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
and I think I responded to the meme. I was like, "Oh, when can I start wearing my leather like that?"
Yeah. We had a whole discussion in the memes channel in our Discord server. And as I pointed out to Sheba, one of our other hosts here on the network, I said, just take your other cosplay stuff and just put spikes on it. You'll be fine. You know, you got an old Mass Effect Commander Shepard cosplay. Just put spikes on it. You got a SpongeBob SquarePants cosplay. Just put spikes on it.
Ooh.
See this?
The Beagle Freedom Project.
Yes. So this is a Christmas gift from my hubby, who, because our one of our accounts that a place that we buy a lot of things from, they have a thing where you give a donation every time you buy something to this particular nonprofit charity that helps rescue beagles, because beagles are the most tested upon canines.
Are they really?
Yes, because of their very docile nature. So
I rescue.
That's why they don't use cats.
No. Cats fight back.
My rescue puppy died today.
Oh,
yeah, I'm very sad.
So, I have worn this like every single day. This is like my new go-to for a uniform for working at home.
Very good.
So there.
So
that's what I've been doing.
This is going to be an interesting episode, I think. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. So this came out on December 25th, 2020. And I watched it on Christmas Day, and then I rewatched it today.
Wow.
And because I walked away from it after watching it the first time, and I thought, okay, well, that, it was fun. It was, a decent popcorn movie. It had plot holes you could drive a truck through. And there were issues, but especially considering it's a DC live action movie, it was okay. It was fun. It was good enough. Then I got on Discord and have been pummeled relentlessly for 10 days now, 12 days. I'd have to look at a calendar. And so I went into it the second viewing with a very different eye and was looking for some certain specific things. And I will say that while I do see other flaws in it now that I didn't see before, I also have more of an appreciation for the movie. because I think looking at it critically to find those things also caused me to look critically at it and accidentally found other good things.
Though you saw it twice.
Yeah, I watched it the first time and I got done with it and I thought, okay. I had some issues. I had some questions, and that was probably my bigger thing was questions. I'm like, I need to watch this again just to, see what maybe I missed something. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. Maybe, maybe I just missed some of the story. I'm like, what did I, why was this so glaring that it was, missing stuff all the time? And I watched it a second time, and then I realized I've got 5 hours on to get back. And, I like Eric, I found some things I thought were well done, but I think my second viewing really let me insight into the fact that, this just wasn't written very well. Mm-hmm. I mean, the actors did a good job, the director did a good job, but the story was lacking on several levels. I mean, it was a story, it was plot holes, it was the characters I thought were kind of weird. A lot of stuff that we'll get into.
Okay.
That's my initial.
And Robin, what were your thoughts? Have you seen it? I can't imagine you watched it a second time.
No.
Okay.
I haven't because I was furious watching it.
I don't understand that reaction. We're going to get to that in a few minutes, but I understand people who didn't like it, but there are people who are livid about this movie, and I don't get it. I'm I think we watched completely different, at least Tim and I watched completely different movies. I know that. And then he made it sound like you're even more livid than he was.
Oh yeah, I was punching the pillow angry. And it's because I just feel like the writing, the actors tried, but I think the writing and in some respects the direction and when we get to this part, the credits, the end credits, I think were just egregious. So that's where I'm gonna stick. There's my landing. I stuck it right there.
Okay.
Furious.
Okay. So, oh boy, this is going to be. So where to start? I normally don't drink when we podcast. I normally don't drink at all, but I tell you what, if I did,
you might want to
I think this would be a good episode to have started with. So, we talked about this before. Our last episode was the first Wonder Woman movie, and that one was directed by Patty Jenkins, but not written by her, whereas this one was written and directed by Patty Jenkins. She had also written and directed Monster, which did really well, got critical acclaim, and everybody was excited to see what she was going to do with this one. People were excited to find out that she's going to both write and direct Rogue Squadron, an upcoming Star Wars movie. And now a lot of the internet is scared the crap scared out of them about Rogue Squadron now. So we've got Gal Gadot back as Diana and Wonder Woman again. We've got Chris Pine as Steve Trevor. We've got Kristen Wiig as Barbara Minerva / Cheetah. And we have Pedro Pascal, best known for Game of Thrones and The Mandalorian, as Maxwell Lord, the main antagonist. And so I have a lot of notes I have written down here. There's a collection of things that I think were good things, and then there's a collection of things I think were bad things. So just to kind of give people an idea of what we're about to discuss, in my opinion, the good things were the concept, the setting of the 1980s. I thought the directing and the acting was good, and a couple of other little nuanced things. And what was not good, we talked about the fact that there were big plot holes. The Maxwell Lord character, I think, was not written very well at all. The mechanics of the magic side of things that was going on was not written well and was not consistent and didn't make sense. There have been some complaints about the CG. I think there were parts where the CG definitely fell apart, especially at the end of the movie. And then there were two issues that a lot of people are debating back and forth about, and I'm sure we're about to as well. And one of which is the issue of Diana and Steve being intimate. And the other is about the fact that Diana is pining for Steve early on in the movie, and then she has him and then she loses him. So those are the topics that I predict that we're going to cover. Are there additional ones we feel like we need to throw in as far as general topics?
No, I think everything in my mind is kind of along those pathways. Yeah.
And that,
there's I can get myself in those pathways.
okay.
Yeah.
That seems to be the most conversed topics about this movie on the internet. I'm really surprised. I'm surprised about everything about this movie. Both the amount of discussion that it's generated and then how much of a disappointment overall it was. Like, I enjoyed parts of the movie. For me, this is very much like The Last Jedi. There were parts I thought were really, really good. There were a lot of good scenes, but the overall movie as a movie didn't hold together. And then there were a lot of crappy scenes too. But I thought it was good enough. I thought it was okay. And a lot of people don't feel that way at all. So,
one thing I'm surprised about in the discussions I've been reading online, a lot of people seem to point to that opening sequence, the opening event, I guess, on Themyscira as a very well-crafted scene. And they thought it was great. And I didn't think it was that good. I thought the CGI was bad. The physics of it looked all kind of weird. I liked the piece they were trying to portray to us. Yeah. With what was going on with Diana and how the shortcut and this and that. But the actual events of the action didn't hold up for me at all.
But for me, Lou, that set the stage for the movie for me, and I was really excited for about 5 minutes. CGI stuff aside, I can forgive that because they were trying to do something big, right? But what I couldn't forgive was everything that came after that, because there was no point in the movie where I felt that whatever lesson her mother and her mentor and their other folks were trying to teach her was ever learned. And in some respects, the hype about this being, a new type of superhero movie held me right there. And then it completely fell apart for me after that.
Okay. And I think that's where I think there were a lot of confused expectations going into this.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think a lot of people, because they put that opening scene online, especially, a lot of people were looking at that as if it's a trailer for the movie and it's supposed to reflect the movie. And it didn't. For me, it was a nonsensical throwaway scene. It had nothing to do with the rest of the movie.
Well, right.
And
that's
so
why
to
I was
take
so
that, but that's, I guess that's my point. Like, to base the rest of the movie on whether or not it had anything to do with that scene, it doesn't make the rest of the movie bad. It makes that scene bad.
Well, they were able to show that scene because it didn't give away anything from the movie.
Right.
It did showcase action and,
marketing wise, it was fine.
It's a good choice, right?
But it was a bad choice as far as setting expectations. And
the only thing it did set up was the whole thing of her using the golden armored suit thing that Asteria had, and also going to.
Well, no, that flashback happened later in the movie, though. That was with her and Steve. Later on.
No, what I'm saying is that the golden statue, the statue of what was her name, Asteria, was there wearing the armor in that opening sequence.
In that opening scene. Yes.
And that was what she was looking towards when she was sitting on the ground when, I forget who the character that grabbed her from throwing the spear to win the contest, set her down, and you could see she was like looking really distraughtly as a child who was just, taking something away from her, and also looking up at Asteria. But
at that point in the movie, you don't know the context for that statue really anyway.
Not at all.
I still feel like
it came full circle at the end.
It did, but because there was also another reference point in the movie, they could have just extended that a little bit and got rid of that entire first scene, because if it had the effect on people like it had on Robin, where that scene felt right and the rest of the movie felt broken, I think what didn't fit was the scene.
But I didn't watch any trailers. I actually purposefully didn't engage in any other than hearing the hype on, TV. This is going to change superhero movies forever. And Lord help me if it does, I'll never see another superhero movie.
I never heard that it was supposed to change superhero movies forever. It wasn't any different than any other superhero movie.
Yeah, well, or a new kind of, I think it was a new kind, it was billed as a new kind of superhero movie. And so that's the expectation I went in with it. And the opening scene fit with that expectation. And then the movie completely started to unravel for me.
And see, I wonder what you would have thought of the movie if they didn't have that opening scene.
I would have thought it was a poorly written rom-com with no com.
Okay. I definitely agree with the poorly written part. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that, I mean, generally speaking, if we zoom out a little bit, and we're about to dive like headlong into spoilers here, but if we zoom out, I get the impression we can all agree that the acting was good, the directing was good, the writing was abysmal.
I'm going to say the directing not so good, but
oh, okay. You are the first person that I've asked about who has said that, to include your husband.
Because again, the director, and there was no tension between the director and the writer, unless of course there was a schizophrenic break in whatever trailer she was going back to every night. And so for me, there's that fit together. So I couldn't separate the writing and the directing. So for me, they just both fell short. And
see, I thought she got good performances from the actors. I thought that the framing of everything was done well. The piecing together of things was done well. It's just that the pieces sucked.
Yeah, I thought she got good performances out of the actors. Even though I didn't like some of the characters they portrayed. I mean, but some of that, they fit really well in the 80s, like, Max Lord's character. I didn't care for the character. I thought it was nothing. I don't like that kind of character to begin with as far as personality goes, but it fit the 80s.
It was very much an 80s type character.
Yes.
Yep. But my bigger problem with everything was the whole, the story didn't seem very consistent. In the way they applied the magical aspect of the Dreamstone, right? That's what it was called.
I think so.
Wish. Oh yeah. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, maybe. So, but it didn't seem very consistent how that was placed. There was a lot of confusion. People that watched it, whether or not, how it was doing what it did. What it did take away and give it to somebody else, or was it, some people were assuming that Diana's powers were leaving and going to what was her character's name? Barbara. And that really wasn't the case, but then it was awkward to how that portrayed. Some sequences you had where Diana was losing her powers, and in the next scene she was doing phenomenal stuff, but you could tell she was labored doing it. And I'm like, okay, so you could barely break open the lock on that door going in to see Max Lord, and yet the next scene you're having trouble, but you were throwing yourself over vehicles and all kinds of stuff that nobody would do if you weren't a superhero type thing. And it just didn't seem very consistent. It just seemed so. In that inconsistency led to confusion in the storyline and confusion of the viewer for what was going on.
When I watched it the second time,
Dreamstone,
I was a lot less confused about those sorts of things. And there were a lot of things that didn't make any sense to me the first time around that when I watched it the second time, I'm like, okay, well, now that I have more context and now that I know a little bit more about how they tried to say that this was supposed to work, it makes more sense. Like her powers, they weren't going to anybody else, but they were waning over time, just like Maxwell Lord's, the payment he had to make, that was over time. Kristen Wiig's loss of humanity was over time. And I think that, so to cover some of the good things, I liked the concept of the movie, even if the execution was very flawed. I liked the concept. In the first Wonder Woman movie, we had the concept of love and hate. And, so hate was kind of personified in the villain, even though I thought the ending was a little rough. In this one, we had greed. And the entire movie, it was about greed and the consequences of greed. And so what better time period than to set it in the 80s? So that made sense too. So I liked this setting, and I thought they did really well with portraying the setting and the costumes and the set pieces. And that mall at the beginning of the movie, that's where I used to hang out as a teenager. And so, there were little things that kind of pissed me off a little bit, like the phone booths were blue and not red. And the Timeout arcade was actually up on the 3rd level, not the 2nd level. And that's not where the Orange Julius was. It was down the hallway. But it was still kind of fun to see that. Right. But so the setting worked, and I liked that concept. I liked the fact that we're not just getting go and punch the bad guy in the face for 20 minutes in this big Avengers wrap up at the end, and then yay, we won the day. Like there's something a little bit more meaningful behind the concept. And I also like the fact that when they used the Dreamstone, they were each wishing for something they didn't have that they felt they could never successfully attain. And in doing that, they had to make payment with what was most valuable about them or most valuable to them. Diana had to give up her powers in order to get the one void that she couldn't fill in her life back. She's watching these other people go out on dates and stuff like that. And she's just has to watch from a distance. And so to get that back, she has to pay with her powers. Barbara wants to actually be noticed and be somebody. But in doing so, she has to pay with the one value that you look like you disagree.
Go ahead.
Okay. She has to pay with the one thing that gives her some sort of value, which is her humanity. Maxwell Lord is going after, riches and quote, more at the cost of what he already has and doesn't appreciate: his son, his health. I liked that sort of a concept. That's the type of thing we normally don't see covered in this sort of movie.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have a problem with a strong female character who can stand on her own, pining.
Oh my gosh. This whole argument makes me so frustrated. I have zero problem with it, because whether you're a man or a woman, it is perfectly acceptable for you to pine over a lost relationship. And I'm utterly confused at how just rabid people have been over this particular issue. I'm like, okay, so first of all, the quote pining we see, Steve Trevor shows up 45 minutes into the movie. And prior to that, we have two scenes. If you don't count the time that Barbara brought it up, we have two scenes where we see Diana thinking about Steve. One is when she's out there on the streets in downtown DC in an affluent area where there are restaurants and stuff. And, the age that she is right now, I say age with air quotes, her peers, and I say peers with air quotes, the other people around her that she interacts with on a day-to-day basis, they're in that age where they're going out on dates or they're in, earlier relationships and stuff like that. She has to watch from a distance. She is socially alone. She doesn't have any of that in her life. She sees airplanes because Reagan National Airport's right there, and that makes her think of Steve. So that's one moment. And then the other moment, very shortly after that, is when just on a whim, she's like, oh, yeah, well, I wish I had Steve back. And then we move on. And other than when Barbara asks if you've ever been in love before, which is Barbara, that's an external stimulus bringing it up. To me, like, I've heard people, I won't say any names, but in Discord, people are talking about, like, quote, and I quote, serious mental health issue. That's not a serious mental health issue. There's nothing about those, I would say 2.5 scenes that anybody familiar with the DSM-5 would use that and diagnose it as, wow, you are like really messed up in the head. So to answer your question, no, I have zero problem with that. In fact, I feel like that made her very believable.
So I had a problem with not the fact that he was pining for Steve, because in my mind, I'm saying, okay, so it's been 70 years for her, or for us. For her, 70 years may be like a week because of the age she lives and how long it is and so forth. So I kind of say, okay, so if she still has him on his mind, fine.
Mm-hmm.
What I had a problem with more of the fact was that she didn't seem like the same strong, witty, well put together character we had in the first one, and we had her in Batman vs Superman, and we had her in Justice League. She seemed like a completely different character as far as how she carried herself, how she portrayed herself. I'm just thinking back to small things like in the first movie when she was the fish out of water in our world, coming from Themyscira and trying to learn the ways and so forth. And she's talking with Steve and his secretary. The comic timing was really good. And she was, the secretary was talking about how, well, secretary, I just do what he wants me to do, and I get him things when he asks me for things. And she's like, we call that slavery. It was like,
right.
Exactly.
She was witty. She was good. It was a different character.
It was a fish out of water story. Here, she's acclimated to, quote, the real world. Like, she fits in now. You don't have that fish out of water.
She'd be more on top of her game, and she didn't portray herself as a strong character anymore.
I don't understand that.
Right.
In what way was she weak?
She just didn't have the wherewithal to do what she wanted to do. She seemed stronger and more headstrong and more driven to get what she wanted to do in the first movie.
She was naively headstrong in the first movie. In this one, she seemed much smarter, much more in control of when she wanted to do something. She knew how to go about doing it. In the first movie, to me, she felt naive and was only able to navigate that world because she had someone from that world helping her along. Now, I felt like she was a stronger character because she knew how to navigate this world and got done what she wanted to get done.
But did she?
Yeah.
She was stuck. I feel like in this movie, she was stuck. She was stuck in a moment of longing and wanting, and nothing compelled her to towards that strength. And it just feels like she got stuck in this moment for however long you want to say it is. For me, it's unhealthily long. And that's where I feel like I didn't get the same Wonder Woman that I thought I knew.
Okay. I felt like I got one that fit into the world more. I got one that was more like the comic books in the sense that she knew how to operate in the world around her more than the origin story version who was the fish out of water in the first movie. And the other point about her being focused on her relationship with Steve is also part of her character development through this movie, because that is where her character ends up at the end of the movie. She's able to let him go. And that was part of the progression of her character journey. So in that regard, I think that worked too.
Yeah. And I can see both sides of that argument. So I'm not, I mean, we'll agree to disagree because I'm not going to come around to your side, but I think they're both valid points. The other thing that kind of bothers me about this is, her love for Steve. It seemed misplaced. They didn't have a huge connection in the first movie. I mean, they did, but it seemed artificially accelerated. And for her to have this connection with him for this long, when the connection she had was only a few days. I
will concede that, for the amount of time they spent together in the first movie,
that was a little weird
for her. Yeah. So, but to me, you're absolutely 110% correct. The only response I have to that, I know, right? It's you've got a little bit of the artificiality of a movie. They could only portray a certain time period there. If you go back to other Wonder Woman lore, where you've got the television series from back in the late 70s, you've got generations of comic books. there's an assumption that Steve Trevor was the person that she's been in love with. And I know you can't take that and then put it into a movie and assume that the people who are watching the movie have that backstory. We talk about that all the time with Star Wars content. Like I get that. You win that point. I've got no defense other than on a personal level, I accepted it because I was familiar with that background and I knew that they could only portray a certain period of time in that first movie. It's not dissimilar from Steve Rogers and Agent Carter.
Peggy.
Thank you.
Agent
Peggy Carter. I was about to say
Carter.
Patty and I'm like, no, that's the director's name. And Peggy Carter from Captain America, they had to kind of accelerate the time in that movie. And they kind of did so with like the montage thing, which I'm not a big fan of, but they did a better job in that movie because they wrote it better.
They gave more time, yeah. So the other thing that when we get into the story, and I think we've talked about the whole love romance thing enough of this, but
Robin probably want. I don't know. It looked like she wanted to jump in.
She loves romantic comedy. Yeah. No, the whole wish stone thing. I like the concept. I like that whole want versus need thing we discussed. That they discussed in the movie here, but the Max Lord character and his obsession with this stone and how he even knew about this thing boggled my mind too, because he didn't seem like the kind of guy that would be going out and doing research to find this obscure. Oh my God, there's this obscure stone thing that was in mythology that I can use to get wishes and get things from people. I gotta find this.
And I got the impression he hired the thugs at the beginning of the movie, but with what money? If he's broke.
Well, his investors.
Oh, see, I didn't get that.
Okay,
at
that's
all,
fair. Okay,
that.
yeah, the investors'
Maybe
money.
He did.
Well, because how else did he know that it ended up at the Smithsonian?
Right.
Good question. Yep. No, I hadn't thought about that. Yep. But how did he even know about this thing in the first place? I mean, it's like this is an obscure. It's not like it was like, oh, the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun. Everybody knows about that. Nobody knows about this freaking wish stone thing. He's been researching this thing. He knows what it's going to do. I'm like, he doesn't seem that smart to me. That was what got me. He doesn't seem that smart that he would have this thought process of, I'm going to get this thing and do this whole thing.
I can see the obsession side of him, but yeah, there's no indication that. I mean, you can be obsessed all you want, but if you don't have the intellect to actually. Yeah.
Right. Because now here you got him who doesn't really have the wherewithal to know this stuff. And you've got two people that are fairly well versed in their fields, Barbara and Diana, who don't really know what it is. Diana knows more because she kind of lived through some of this stuff. As
but even she didn't know it first, and they're experts. I've known people who work at the Smithsonian. I mean, they're not like just out of college usually. They're experts, and yet he knew.
Right. So that part of the story kind of broke for me. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I want to come back to the Dreamstone thing, but before we move on, I know I kind of went off there about the relationship thing, and I want to make sure that Robin gets a chance to.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
So no, I think I want to let it die, like truly let it die. But I do want to say that this was not supposed to be the Wonder Woman of the television shows. And I am never going to be one that says, Patty Jenkins ruined my childhood by giving me a different Wonder Woman. But what I do want to say is I think the point of the movie, in order to advance her powers, latent or otherwise, was for her to master flight. And I did a little bit of reading around, and that's where the comic books, knowledge of the comic books probably enhanced the viewing of the movie, because you understand that there was this controversy from what I've read, because I haven't read the comic books, about how she acquires flight and what that was like. I think they could have done that with better by not bringing Steve back, but by having her truly dig into whatever it is he had her experience, fall in love with about flight. right? So if it's about flight and about her advancing her powers, bringing him back hurt the story for me, because it wasn't about her discovering it on her own. It was about her looking at someone else and saying, give this to me. And that's the problem for me.
I think to me, I'm trying to put myself in the head of the writer. I'm guessing that if greed is going to be the concept they're exploring in the film, what is the one thing that it would be easy to get the audiences to believe that Diana doesn't have but wants? And so to me, that seems to be the purpose for bringing Steve Trevor into the movie. And from a marketing point of view, I think there's also some benefit there. It's a character that audiences are familiar with. You know, Chris Pine is a big actor, and, you know, so I kind of get that side of things. I do agree that, so I do still firmly believe that near the end of the movie, it is her finally being able to let him go. And then that allows her to renounce her wish and then get the ball rolling for her to convince everybody else to, which is another silly plot mechanism, I think. So there's that. But if the only other thing she got out of that whole thing was that kind of him inspiring her to learn how to fly, and especially if that was like the reason, that would be horrifically disappointing. And I'd suggest maybe she should never write anymore. But I think that, I don't, there were so many other ways that she could have gotten to that point. Yeah.
The flying part for me, and I don't have the knowledge of the comics over the years, so I didn't, know she flew or whatever, but to have her flying now and not flying 30 years later in the events of BVS and Justice League is like, why wasn't she flying there? There
apparently was a little bit of disconnect between the Justice League that we ended up getting and what Patty Jenkins, what her path was for these movies, because they're things behind the scene. I mean, if you look at the mess with Justice League and Zack Snyder leaving, Joss Whedon coming in, now we've got the Snyder cut, and it's not any worse than the debacle we had with the sequel trilogy in Star Wars, when you had 3 different writers and somebody's doing one thing. Different side effect, but same,
that concern,
very messy in production. But I mean, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at Justice League and see whether or not there were a lot of times where flying would have helped or would have. I mean, she could always jump far. I mean, she always had like that Hulk factor.
And she did that long jump thing in Batman versus Superman a few times. But
and she couldn't always fly in the comic books either. Like, it was something where it was more of a Hulk thing. Even Superman in the very, very, very beginning. Remember leaping tall buildings in a single bound? That was what he did. He didn't actually fly at the very beginning, apparently.
Right.
But Wonder Woman couldn't either. And then later on, some of the comic book writers gave her that ability, I guess. She's one of the characters I know very little about her backstory compared to some of the other Justice League characters. But that was. And so I got to ask you guys, the invisible jet thing, to me, that felt like the worst possible fan service ever. Yep. Like, that was such a stretch.
I get it, but it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, my dad did this thing years ago. We're like, what?
I don't know. I've only done it with a coffee cup before, but here we go.
It makes sense, but I'm like, that's something you're pulling something out of your butt. It's like, come on.
and just so they could have the proverbial invisible jet on the.
The other thing is, you've got a World War I, not two, World War I pilot jumps in a
Now, I was going to ask you about that too.
Going, I can just turn this on and get this thing fired up. And
the controls are the same, right?
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I was looking at that and I'm thinking, as a pilot, Lou must be eating this up right now.
I'm like, what the frig is that? But whatever.
That was one of those examples of, like, I saw that whole scene and I'm like, oh my gosh. Even when I thought I still liked the movie, I saw that scene And I'm like, oh, please don't tell me this is where things are going to jump the shark. And that's pretty much for me where they started to.
Right.
That was so bad.
But overall, though, I mean, that kind of thing didn't bother me as much. That seemed like fun popcorn stuff. What bothered me was the actual story. I mean, it didn't seem believable, plausible. I mean, not the fact that it was comic book-esque and out there, because I don't mind things that are out there. Mm-hmm. This just seemed hard to follow and inconsistent and jumping around, and I don't know. I mean, even down to the point where when he was locked into that Star Wars satellite thing where he's beaming or touching people with particles.
People. Yeah.
His son wished he was there with him. At that point, he should have been beamed right from where he was to where the kid was, and everything would have stopped.
No. Wait. The son had already made his wish.
Had he?
And it was something along it was some cheesy thing like that. I wish, for you to be successful
every
or
time
something.
He said, no.
But after that, like he did a real wish, and it was something along the lines of for him to succeed or something. And I thought, okay, except we know he's going to fail at the end. So doesn't that break the story?
But wait,
that's true.
How come some people got 2 wishes?
I was wondering about that when I watched it again, and I didn't catch anybody getting 2.
I thought there was some. I thought
people said Barbara did, but Barbara didn't actually.
He was able to grant a second wish or something.
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Now at the end, Barbara got additional like wishy things, but not because she wished him, because he collected other people's wishes and took that power. Okay, now I'm going to take this and route it through to her. So it was almost like him gifting her things. Right. That wasn't her wishing. So that didn't count.
Have to watch it again,
but it shouldn't be that confusing. Like, we shouldn't have to sit here and have a conversation trying to figure out the mechanics of that basic a thing of that basic an element of the film. Like, it should have not been confusing to the audience. And so even the satellite thing you're talking about, Lou, it's a particle beam thing, and it can reach out and touch everybody. So wait, it can touch everybody. And the president himself says, well, I mean, it's a metaphor, but yeah.
Right.
So if it's a metaphor and it's not literally touching, the whole end of the movie doesn't work.
Yeah. Yep. But even that, to me, that is like, okay, I can buy it. But the confusing part was like some people's wishes happened immediately. Some people's wishes took time to develop. It's like, why didn't Diana lose her powers right away? Why did we have to bring Steve back,
Diana and Barbara,
as a guy in another body instead of just
now that
there?
I want to come back to that.
Coffee,
yeah,
the coffee came there.
I want to put a pin in that because that's an important point, and that also ties into another important discussion. But yeah, we're definitely coming back to that one. So I will say this in defense of this story: Diana and Barbara and Maxwell Lord, the price that they had to pay for their wishes were doled out over a longer period of time. His health declined over time. Barbara's loss of humanity declined over time. And by the end of the movie, she was like completely sociopathic, had no empathy for anybody else. And then, of course, Diana's powers waned over time. So for all of the inconsistencies in the film, at least within those characters, that gradual fall off in the payment they had to make was consistent, if not very confusing, especially with Diana, because you didn't know whether it was, okay, is that going into Cheetah? Is she failing here, but then she's okay because Cheetah's like sleeping right there, like Cheetah's taking a nap, and so it's not draining from, like, are they sharing a power pool? Or, because, cats sleep a lot, right? So it was never clear, which again, another failing of.
But it was also inconsistent. Like I said, I mean, she could barely take the lock off the door going into Max Lord's complex.
Yeah, it got more severe over time, but along the way it was up and down as it. Yeah, you're right.
And I'm like, so what's really going on here? That made it more confusing.
Yeah. Oh, and another thing. So the scene in the desert where they're on that car chase thing, and near the end of it,
Right.
She takes her lasso out. She grabs the missile. She throws the missile away, grabs the street pole, swings in, picks up the kid by hitting the top of the kid's shoulder with her arm, which should have sent the kid like spiraling. But no, but somehow physics, it magically scooped the kid up from underneath because #reasons. And then she loses her grip on the rope and slides off of it, leaving the rope tied up to the street lamp, while also coiled neatly around her belt as soon as she stands up.
I didn't see
and
that.
I know that movies a lot of times have little gaffes like that, but like that's a major... This isn't like characters reloading their guns between scenes or something. This is like, that is her thing. Like, it's her lasso, and she's actively using it. And the point of that part of the story is that it slips out of her hands. So it's not like she sets it down on a table and walks away for a second. You don't know whether she goes back over and picks it up again. It's an active part of the scene. And then all of a sudden it's immediately back on her belt again. And I know that's a little thing, but it's an example of something that was very noticeable, and the whole movie was just strewn.
It's an example of being sloppy and why everything just didn't work.
Okay.
So let's go back to this. Steve thing.
So I want to tread carefully here. Okay. This has been a big point of contention on the internet, and I agree with some of it, not with other stuff. And this might be an area where the three of us disagree again, but the nature of this conversation can be triggering to some people, and we're going to try to make this as non-triggering for people as we can. Okay. And in part because I don't think the intention, while it was bad writing, I don't think the intention of the writer or director was to have it come across this way. I truly think she did not take this into consideration when she was writing this scene. But we have the situation where Steve comes back, and like Lou said, everything we're about to discuss could have been easily fixed by Steve just showing up. Simple as that. But instead, Steve's consciousness, the Steve-ness of Steve, was inhabiting someone else's body. So once Diana finds this out, we immediately, like, we get Chris Pine throughout all of the rest of the movie, other than the scene where he's like looking in the mirror and all that. It's Chris Pine that the audience is seeing as well, because we're seeing what Diana's seeing. So, they're becoming romantic again. They wake up the one morning in bed. There's no sex scene in the movie, but it's implied that they were probably intimate that night. And then, they get up and go about their business and stuff. And there's a big discussion online about if that presents a problem regarding consent, because while Diana consented and Steve consented, Steve was inhabiting somebody else's body. And that the person who inhabited that body could not consent. So I'm going to list the different perspectives on this, and then I think we'll each just kind of give our own personal comments and we'll move on. We're not going to debate this. We're not going to fall down a rabbit hole on it, but it is a big enough failure in the movie that this has become such a point of contention, because this is something that should have been steered around somehow and written differently, that we have to bring it up in order to fairly review this movie. So the person whose body was not consciously there in the body, and yet the body was involved. So that right there seems to pretty simply sum up that there was no consent on that person's behalf, and that is a major, 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 major problem. Other perspectives on it on the internet. One perspective has been brought up, to which Patty Jenkins herself just briefly said in Twitter, exactly. Especially in the 80s, there were a lot of like body swapping movies. And it was to the point where it was almost like just kind of a trope. You had Big, you had Vice Versa, you had like Father Like Son, I think Freaky Friday was before the 80s.
Freaky Friday.
You had 18 again.
Well, there's a remake
13 going on 30. Dream a Little Dream. The Change Up, Wish Upon a Star, etc. And in some of these movies, the people who changed roles were at varying levels, okay, were somehow involved in relationships with other people. And it was never looked at from that perspective before. Now, to be fair, there were a lot of social issues that, you know, the flip side of that coin is that there were a lot of social issues that weren't discussed then that are being discussed today and that were glossed over then and never brought to light. And maybe those movies would be looked at differently now if they were released in 2020. So you have to also throw in that counterpoint. Another perspective on this. At this point in the story, there's no reason to believe, based on the way it's written, that Diana didn't think that this was a permanent situation. I wish for Steve to come back. Steve came back. Steve is back. Now, I'd like to think that she should have given some consideration to what happened to this other guy's consciousness. Like, did he die and go to heaven? Or did he get like bumped out into another body? Or is he like in somebody's dog right now? Or like, how does that work? But I can accept the fact that on Diana's mind, she has every reason to believe that this is now Steve going forward. This isn't a temporary thing. She doesn't even know rescinding a wish is a thing until later at the end of the movie. Like, that's another perspective on it, is that in Diana's mind, this is now a permanent thing. And in Steve's mind, he's like, listen, you know, I fell asleep for 5 minutes and I wake up and it's the 80s. Like, to him, he never really, you know, no time has passed from him falling over dead to waking up again. Another perspective is that just the generalized, and I've only seen a little bit on this, just the existential question of, you know, is to what extent, and I'm not trying to comment one way or the other, to what extent is somebody's body them versus their consciousness them? So like when you die and your body gets cremated, you don't feel that. You're not in that shell anymore. So to what extent the two people who are actually experiencing the romantic event are both there and are both consenting. And again, the belief being that those are going to now be the permanent people inhabiting those bodies. To what point is the shell, like the argument I saw was that like the cells in my body right now are not the same cells that were in my body 5 years ago, because your body's constantly like remaking cells and stuff. It's literally not the same body I used to have. Right. So at what point does the physiology of the mind, the consciousness inhabiting the flesh, like there's a whole existential thing there. And I'm not a philosopher and I'm not even trying to present an opinion on that argument. I'm just throwing out there different things that have been said. I'd like to go around the table real quick and each just get our own brief opinion on number one. Did you notice it while you watched it? Number two, did the scene bother you either while you were watching it or when it was brought to your attention afterward? And just kind of a brief commentary, and then we'll move on. So Robin, your thoughts on this whole issue?
Is she muted?
Oh, she is muted. I see her lips moving. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I had the puppy was whining.
Oh,
So
we don't mind whining
Oh, yeah.
puppies on the show. That's okay.
So yeah, no, I have zero thoughts on that. Sorry.
Okay,
guys.
no, that's fine. That's fine. And not everybody does. And not everybody needs to. Lou, what are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts are it's just ridiculous to have the argument about that being a non-consensual relationship. I'm like, it's a story. There was no ill intent to it. There was no harm made. You know, it wasn't like we were doing something to purposely hurt somebody. It was just a mechanism for the story. What I had a problem with and why I brought it up in the first place was, why did it happen that way? You know, the guy wishes for a cup of coffee and a cup of coffee appears. He didn't wish for a cup of coffee and all of a sudden a facsimile of something that looked like coffee that was really something else appeared. That he said, "Oh, it tastes like coffee."
Yeah, that's true. It's not like he had a bottle of beer and all of a sudden the beer was coffee. Yeah,
Right.
that's fair.
So to me, it's like Steve should just reappeared as Steve. My whole time I'm watching the movie, I'm like, she's with this guy that she sees as the guy that was there, because she doesn't see Steve. She sees the guy. I mean, mentally she sees Steve.
Only after Steve reveals he's Steve. Yeah.
Right, but well, my impression from the story given was that when she looks at him, physically looks at him, she sees the other guy. She doesn't see Steve. She sees Steve in her heart.
Yeah. It's a metaphor. Yeah.
But the guy that she is with is still this other guy.
Right.
You know, so it's like, to me,
that's
it's
how
like,
she knows what he looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm like, this is just such a BS story.
Yeah.
Mechanic. I'm like, what the?
And that's part of why we now, because of that, and because they didn't do what you said, just have Steve show up. I mean, why not just teleport him in here? We're dealing with mystical, literally God powers.
Right.
Just have him pop into existence and it would be so much cleaner. And instead now we have people who look at this type of issue and take it very, very seriously because of the real world ramifications that real people, not fictional people, but real people experience. And now they're seeing this represented in fiction and it bothers them. I'm not one of those people, but I understand. Yeah. No, I get
it. I mean,
yeah,
it's no different than being under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and you're a different person, and somebody took advantage of you. I get that, but that's not what we were trying to portray in the scene. The movie was really he was replaced with somebody else. It should have been a complete person there, not
right. And so
not somebody else who is.
To your point, I think it's important to keep in mind that I also don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was meant to be a statement on something. I think it was an oversight. I think it was just something that wasn't taken into consideration when they were writing that aspect of the story. So I think that's one of the important things to take away. And then again, I think that, I mean, you can sit there and, Diana should have taken this into consideration, that into consideration. I guess for me personally, my perspective on it, I didn't catch it the first time around in the movie because it was never addressed. It was never brought up. There literally, like I said, there wasn't a sex scene. They just wake up in the morning and they go about their day. Right. So I didn't take time to pause to think about the sex scene that wasn't shown. I'm thinking about what I'm seeing on the screen, which is them getting up and him saying, I just had 6 Pop-Tarts and 3 cups of coffee and this place is amazing. That's what's going through my head. Right. Is the 3 cups of coffee, the Pop-Tarts, and
weird the way they did it. Yeah.
So
I mean, for all intents and purposes, the guy should be just as upset with the fact that Steve's throwing all this junk food into his body.
Right. Well, but
that's like, you're abusing my body by eating Pop-Tarts and everything else.
But dude stocked up Pop-Tarts and he had like cheese in a can.
That's
so
true.
I mean,
and I'll say this
saying.
As as a comic aspect of this in my own mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I'm that guy waking up after this whole thing's done, I'm like, wait a minute, I slept with her and don't remember it. Wow. Can I have a redo? It's like, as a joke, I'm thinking. I'm not saying.
Yeah.
No. The whole point of
because there is that would still be a definite like serious issue, but see, and so that's another thing I think about the writing is it becomes like in universe, it becomes an issue because the guy did come back at that time. That guy no longer existed and was to no longer exist in Diana's mind. Now, again, that should have set up a whole different thing of psychological like questions and stuff, but it's a movie and we've only got so much time to, we have a story to tell, hopefully better next time. But I get why people are upset by this issue. And it's an issue I take seriously. I've known people who've gone through that very sort of thing. And that's something I am sensitive to as well. I don't think that was the intent. I think it was a complete oversight. And I think that there are aspects of this story that present enough different perspectives on it for the discussion to be longer than just a couple minutes, and not be quite as clear cut as a real world scenario sort of thing could happen. But we're literally talking about like gods popping consciousnesses inside and out of bodies. That's not a real thing in the real world. So yeah, I don't know, but I get it. And I know that broke the movie for a lot of people. And yeah, it's there are a lot of people. I probably see 2/3 of the discussions I see about this movie are about that single topic. It's hard to not at least bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
So
we've talked about the poor story for the Dreamstone, the poor story for Max Lord.
I want, before we go on,
didn't get the motivation.
The Max Lord thing, because I just wanted to chime in on that real quick. It started out okay for me, but as it went on, the further and further down that rabbit hole he got, it just got sillier and sillier. And it got to the point where I didn't, Pedro Pascal's performance was incredible. I'm like, wow, this guy's got range. I'm really impressed. I just don't want to see his character on screen anymore. It was annoying. It was distracting. I'm like, oh, let's please get through the scene. I just wanted to throw that out there. But you were saying we saw those flaws.
What I didn't get was the motivation for Cheetah either. I mean, I got her motivation in the beginning of what she wished for, but why was she now at odds with Diana?
Because she didn't want it taken away from her. She finally now had attention and value and agency where she had none before.
She seemed adversarial before she thought she was going to lose it too. I don't. It just didn't.
She didn't feel like she did though. She did. I don't think she felt like she did.
Okay. But again, it was kind of unclear to me, at least, and maybe I just missed it.
And that's the thing. Like,
I'm not watching it a third time.
It's one thing to watch a movie a second time and get different things out of it. It's another thing to have to watch a movie a second time just to understand what you saw the first time. Like something like Primer, I get it. But like really like a Wonder Woman movie to walk away confused.
Right.
Well, you're not going to make me watch Primer again, are you?
You might enjoy it more if you watch it like, because now you know what happens. No, we're not. We wouldn't do that to you. We love you, Robin. Yeah. No, and I think that's the one biggest takeaway from this movie. There were too many parts that didn't make sense or were confusing to really feel like it was a good, cohesive story. Like it just... It was broken. And there were a lot of good parts, but the parts never really assembled well, I think.
Yep. No, I 100% agree.
So let's, I think we covered all the major points, unless there's anything else that you guys wanted to comment on or throw in.
Well, didn't Robin have something you want to add about the ending scene?
Oh yeah, the post-credits thing? I was completely ambivalent toward that. I was like, yeah, that was a waste of sitting through the credits.
Well, so here's my problem with it. If they wanted to cast Linda Carter in a movie, they should have cast Linda Carter in a movie. I don't understand why they had to bring Linda Carter back.
Maybe they'll use her in another movie.
It's fan service.
It's fan service, but it's bad fan. It's just...
I don't know.
It made more sense in the Invisible Jet.
Yeah.
Not that would take
I was
much.
okay with the ending scene. I mean, I thought it was fine. It was kind of neat to see her there. She even did her arms out when she twirled thing like she did when she was Wonder Woman, you know. Now, but to me, it's like, are they going to bring her back now in another movie?
If they don't, then I'm with Robin. This scene was useless and annoying and distracting and made no sense. If they bring her back as that character in Wonder Woman 3, which has already been greenlit, then that's different. Then that would serve a purpose at least. But even then, I don't know that I want to see that, because to me, when they do that sort of thing, it's distracting.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to see the actor who played the character a long time ago come back with a new version of that character, but like in a different role standing next to that character, because it breaks the fourth wall.
Well, you know, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Like in, you know, the BSG reboot, we had who played Apollo in the original series? I keep wanting to say.
Now the guy that played Face on the A-Team,
Richard Hatch.
I'm thinking the other. Okay, you're right. Richard Hatch.
Oh,
no, you're right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So, but he came back as another character in the BSG reboot, and it didn't bother me. It seemed fan servicey to me at first, but it was fine. If they do this right with her as Asteria in the next movie, I'm okay with it. But I also don't know, it's like, is she going to be able to be an action-oriented actress right now at her age? I don't know.
But the whole reason,
it will be believable.
The whole reason they even had Linda Carter on the red carpet and in other places was because she was Wonder Woman.
Right.
And now you can't bring Wonder Woman back as somebody else. They needed a different, if they wanted to do that, they needed a different actress. They need a different actress.
I see your point.
So
I don't mind fan service when it doesn't break the fourth wall. And I think that's one of those situations where The Mandalorian does it well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it flows with the story. To me, when the fan service is bringing back something from the real world, when it's bringing back an actor or an actress, it breaks the fourth wall, and then that fan service is not only unnecessary, I think it's harmful. And when I say harmful, I mean from a literary point of view. I do understand that a lot of people were grateful to see Linda Carter there. Some people were really excited about it. I respect that. Just because I'm not one of those people, that's okay. You do you, and I'm happy that you're happy.
Fine with it. Right.
But
yeah, I'm fine with it. It is what it is. I just don't know if we need her back as a new character. It was fun to see, but to me, it was no different than having Stan Lee show up in a movie as whatever, the doorman, or
Yeah, and I will say
various things he's done, which does take you out of the movie for a second, but it's fun.
Yeah. And I will say that at least they did it post credits. If they had done it in the movie itself, that would have been so much worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap this up. I'm going to say that as far as recommendations go, I mean, I would recommend you see it in the sense that you might as well. Right? Like, which is, I know. Not a ringing endorsement, but if you like superhero movies,
go see a superhero
and if you
movie.
like, especially if you like the DC movies, there was enough in it that was good on at least a second viewing after you understand what makes sense and what doesn't. And definitely after listening to us, if you haven't seen it yet, like, you'll understand now. I think, it's worth seeing, but don't get excited about it. Like, keep your expectation bar pretty low and just get some popcorn and enjoy it for what it is, and then walk away and go do something productive with your life. Like, it's
or have some alcohol with
there
you.
There were some good messages about greed and what's actually valuable in your life and what's not. And, the last lines of so many things as Diana's looking around her and seeing that there's so much to life that she probably wasn't really appreciating before. Like, there are some good things in this movie. They're just so heavily overshadowed by,
by poor, sloppy, lazy writing. I mean, it is what it is. I don't want to say that about Patty Jenkins, but it is what it is.
I still respect Patty Jenkins. I still think
she's not coming on the show.
What's that?
Well, I mean,
listen,
and I hope it's just a one-off bad time she had. I mean, not everybody can hit. We said the other night, everybody hit a home run every time they go to bat.
Yeah.
Right.
And she did a fine job with Monster.
Yeah.
Albeit that was based on a true story, so she wasn't really writing the story. She wrote the script, but the story was kind of already there.
And like we mentioned on Random Chatter, we don't know how much involvement Warner Brothers had as far as like giving notes and stuff. Warner Brothers, from other people I've read, other showrunners and producers and stuff, they have a reputation for meddling pretty heavily in projects. And then, like, even if you go back to the early days of the DC stuff, look how many times they went back and changed things. And there was like changes made to Suicide Squad based on how Batman versus Superman did, and then changes to Justice League based on how Suicide Squad did. Like, they have a reputation for like getting their hands in things and messing with things. I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic.
Well, I mean, the next real test we're going to see is Rogue Squadron.
Or Wonder Woman 3, depending on which comes out first.
Right. And, I hate to say it, but I mean, she's got a pretty tough audience now for Rogue Squadron. I mean, Star Wars fans tend not to be so kind when they don't like something.
If she can make just 5 people happy with her Star Wars movie, she will have already tripled the fan results of any of the sequel trilogy movies. Just 5 people on this planet, if she can make them happy, she's so much further ahead.
All right, gents.
We'll see.
All right. I'm guessing neither of you two would recommend it to anybody, right?
No, I mean, I think see it. I mean, if you like superhero movies, see it. I mean, you assuming Wonder Woman 3 is going to be good, you can't see 3 without seeing 2.
That's true. And there's the silver lining. How bad can 3 be after this, right? It's got to be a step up, right, Robin? Right?
Who says you can't see 3 without seeing 2?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that would.
I saw Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, and I didn't have to see the middle.
I saw the middle one first. Yeah, and then saw the other 2.
The boop, 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 hard thing. Yeah.
It happens, Lou.
I mean, you don't have to see the last one.
There was no last one.
Some people say it doesn't even exist.
That doesn't exist. What are we going to cover next time? We've got a few things. We talked about Tenet.
Oh. Yeah.
Tenet.
You guys still?
Oh, we
do Tenet. We can do Soul, which was really good, and a lot of people have a lot of stuff.
I want to see.
A lot of good things to say about that. We were talking before about doing 6 Underground. We can probably put that off because I think either Tenet or Soul are things that maybe are a little more newsworthy at the moment.
Tenet.
Let's do Tenet.
No, Robin does a no on Tenet. Oh, because there's time travel, Lou.
Yes.
She doesn't like that subgenre.
Tenet. I want to see Tenet. I want to see.
Oh, you
Tenet.
do want to see Tenet?
No,
oh, she was shaking her head and she was saying Tenet. I got confused.
I don't want to.
You needed to write that script better, Robin. That was a very confusing script on that. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
You don't want to see Soul? Is that what you said? Okay.
Yeah. I haven't heard. You might have heard good things about Soul, but people who have seen it and talked to me about it are not.
Saw it 1.5 times.
Okay.
Brilliant Pixar movie.
1.5.
Brilliant.
Okay. Well, maybe after Tenet.
Okay, so Tenet it is.
All right. So we will be back next week. We will make sure you're adjust your audio settings there, Lou. I know you've got a pretty good system there, I think. So,
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've not yet seen it since it's been on home release, so I don't know if they resolved any of the audio issues. But we are going to cover Tenet next time on Movie Chatter, so tune in next week. We will be recording Thursday night next week, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you'd like to join us in chat, that's when you'd want to show up. Otherwise, go to randomchatter.com/YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit that little button that gives you the notifications when we go live or when we post new videos, and you won't miss a thing. And otherwise, head over to randomchatter.com. We've got a lot of great podcasts over there. A lot of good stuff for you there. We've got some incredible things planned for 2021, including a very, very big surprise, maybe, coming for our Star Wars shows, which we can't talk about yet. But yeah, so 2021 is going to be a good year. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So either that or 2020 was just the trailer, and now we're going to get the feature film. I don't know.
The first of the trilogy.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for Movie Chatter.
Okay,
thanks for hanging out with us, and we will see you again very soon.